Hello, it's Ewan Jones. I'm joined today by Michelle Blackhill. She is also an anti-feminist, and we will be discussing the anti-feminist movement and also traditionalism, traditional gender roles, traditional gender values, and also Christianity, and really looking at how a return to more of a traditional society structure can help gender relations and can help to solve some of the problems caused by the feminist movement. So, Michelle, I'll leave that one with you just to, get your take on this subject and what you think, how you think feminism has damaged the, gender relations, and also maybe how returning to a more traditional society structure can help to repair gender relations.
Yeah, sure. If anyone else like yourself has seen my interview for ICMI this year, I'm actually an ex-feminist. I started calling myself a feminist in 2014 after reading Laura Bates's first book, Everyday Sexism. Since then, I've been able to I went through CBT therapy for a lot of my issues from like childhood and a lot of negative ideas and thoughts I had about myself. And I do feel like now when I'm looking back over Laura Bates's first book, I can definitely see how it's kind of the complete opposite of what CBT therapy teaches. It teaches you to kind of question your initial thoughts, maybe look for other answers, not the first thing that you might assume. Don't always look on the worst thing. Don't connect dots where there might not be any connections. And I do feel like feminism teaches the exact opposite. You know, it's all a big conspiracy. It's patriarchy. And when I was younger, I was much more traditionally minded, and I've gone back to that. I was always kind of more traditional in myself. When I was a feminist, it was kind of more like, oh yeah, well, everyone can do their own thing. It doesn't really matter if, women choose to sleep around, even though I wouldn't choose to do that myself. It's okay for them to do whatever they like. And I wasn't really being quite young. I was only in my early 20s at the time. I didn't have a lot of experience with how that can actually negatively affect women and have a negative effect on society in general. And now that I'm out of feminism and I can see, it doesn't really align with reality in that kind of way, saying that women can do everything that men can do. And it's not to say that women are weaker in like a negative kind of sense. It's just to say that men and women are different and we all have our strengths and weaknesses. And it's a kind of yin yang kind of balance, really. And yeah, now I'm definitely more positive, thinking more healthily. And I do see how feminism had a really negative effect on my life and the relationships. Like it had a slight effect on the relationship I had with my dad, but it definitely had a massive negative effect on the romantic relationship that I was in at the time. And I did go into that a little bit on the interview with Mike and Elizabeth, that
Mm-hmm.
I do consider the way I behaved as I was emotionally abusive, and that there's no excuse for my behavior, but I do attribute it to being very severely depressed, agoraphobic, having panic attacks, and the way that feminism, especially Laura Bates's book, kind
Mm-hmm.
of pushes you towards thinking in this kind of conspiratorial kind of mind.
Yeah, yeah, good. Some good points there. I do remember about that period around 2013, 2014, when a lot of this stuff was just starting. And at the time, I was much more left wing than I am now. And I used to read The Guardian online. And it wasn't actually too bad at one point. It was nowhere near as horrific as it's, or as like all of the woke stuff hadn't started then. And actually, it was kind of in favour of Edward Snowden and Julian Assange, and that was those were the main stories that were happening at that time. And then it seems then the feminist movement started, and I just started seeing all of these articles on there by people like Laura Bates and a lot of the other authors, and like all of these women. And I was just thinking, this is absolutely atrocious. What they're telling young women. This is just not good advice. This is sort of like how to become like really depressed and end up wanting to kill yourself.
Yeah.
And it was like, I mean, this is literally some of the worst stuff you could possibly tell young women. Like all of the insane kind of victimhood complex stuff that she was teaching. I think she did one of the major articles she did was about rape culture and how it like is constantly affecting women in everything they do. And I definitely remember that era as well. And I mean, I can see that it's pretty bad that you got caught up in all of that. And it's good that you're now out of it. And I think for me, I mean that was the first. I've probably like I guess in terms of my own life, I think feminism was probably the first issue that I became more politically involved in, because I wasn't so politically involved before then. I was just like reading various articles on newspapers and that sort of thing. Whereas with this, I was like, I kind of want to say a few things about this, and so I became more politically involved at that point. But as time has gone on, I've sort of felt that it is important, the anti-feminist movement, but I do feel that in terms of the society we have, that it's so there's a massive problem with I'd say the kind of liberal society, and that it is driving men and women apart. And I think it's done enormous damage to gender relations. I see the anti-feminist movement as part of the solution, in that it's pointing out all of these problems that are happening. But I do feel that there is also a need to actually return to a more traditional society. But by doing that, I think that the two genders will get on a lot better with each other. And also I think that it's a nicer society. And so before I was an atheist, that I've now returned to Christianity. And so I think that for me, that's had a massive positive impact on my life. And I think it's a much nicer way of going about your life. And, actually, you're sort of in a local community with all of the other people in your church, and you've got to get on with everyone. And there's always a focus on seeing yourself as a sinner and on looking towards Jesus as a source of goodness. And I think that way of thinking actually really helps us and can really help undo a lot of the damage that occurs otherwise in our lives when we believe that we are the source of goodness, or we believe in our own pride or in ourselves. And that can often lead to quite fractious communities, and to, I'd say again, a breakdown in gender relations. So, I mean, would you agree with that? Would you say that would you advise on a return to Christianity, or just a return to traditional gender values?
Yeah, it's actually funny that you mentioned that, because I didn't know, like you said, that you used to classify yourself as an atheist. I did as well, roughly around the same time as I began to call myself a feminist. I do think I started identifying with atheist just before, maybe a year or 6 months before I started calling myself a feminist, and they're all kind of interlinked, and they start picking up like inspiration from each other. And now I do consider Christianity to be a better kind of guide in that kind of sense. I would say that I'm aiming towards becoming a Christian. I wouldn't classify myself as a Christian as of yet. I do, like you said, I take inspiration from Jesus and the Bible. I haven't read enough of it yet, and I'm not part of a church myself, mainly because I want to be part of a church that is kind of more in line with the teachings of Jesus, rather than kind of being all accepting, kind of more intersectional kind of church. And I'm just like, no, I'm going to stay away from that kind of thing. I know where that leads to. And so, yeah, I do think it is quite a positive thing. When it's quite funny saying that now, when a few years ago, if you told me, oh, you'll be more in line towards aiming towards Christianity, I would have laughed in their faces. Oh no, all these stupid fairy tales, and it's ridiculous to believe in this kind of thing. And so, yeah, I do feel like it's much more positive, focusing on how you can improve yourself and your life, not being arrogant and boastful kind of thing, because I did become quite arrogant as an atheist and a feminist. Not that, like, not all, hashtag not all people who become atheists would be in that way, but I did start going down that path. I was very disrespectful to people's beliefs and why they believe those kind of things. I just was very dismissive. But now I do feel that it is a positive thing. And you also mentioned the gender dynamics. I've been working really hard on how I can improve communication with my partner, who is a man. And it is kind of working with how, like, men, what's a good way of putting it? What's the best way to approach a situation, rather than like telling someone what to do, or being maybe kind of negative if they don't kind of do what you want. Like, if you think of feminists, it's their way or the highway, and if you don't do what they think or say, you're a bigot, you're a misogynist, and all this kind of thing. But I'm more kind of learning how to communicate with men in a better kind of sense. More of, it's strange, I can't really put it into words.
I'm curious about this as well. Yeah,
I think it's more of a compassionate kind of way of communicating. It's also not taking offense if someone doesn't instantly go along with what you say. And I think I heard like a good thing, like when men and women are trying to communicate, when women communicate with each other, it's more of like brainstorming out loud. You can kind of go back and forth, but with men it's more direct. Like, you think, men have a tendency to think more internally, and then only voice like bullet points straight to the point, not kind of fluffing around like I am at the moment, maybe.
Right. Yeah, I think that there is some of that. I'd say, yeah, the internal thinking, and then testing out the narratives against each other. Whereas I suppose with women, I think probably more of a tendency to say something because they want to be heard, and then there's more of empathy within the group about so and so is voicing her, the way she feels, and we should be closer to her and more empathic to her because of it. Whereas with men, it's sometimes more a bit like well, so and so says this and I disagree with that, so there's going to be a bit of a confrontation about this now. And yeah, I mean, I personally try and avoid that, but sometimes it's unavoidable, and it just happens. Um, I do. I do think that that there are generally, I'd say, with socializing with other people. Like I wouldn't say I'm an expert at it, but from what I guess from what I've seen in terms of my own journey in the last few years, I think it helps if you're living a better life yourself. Then that means that you're more useful to other people, and you're, say, if you're sober, then you'll be able to understand them and to relate to them a lot better than if you're intoxicated or whatever. And also, if you are generally, if you have more self-love, you have more love towards the world, towards other people, then they'll respond pretty well to that. And I think that for me, going back to the church, that was just a massive source of that feeling of love towards other human beings, towards the community, and to everyone else. And I think that's helped me to definitely to reconcile with everyone else, with humanity. There are still lots of people who I dislike and so on, and like most of them are on TV. And these people, I don't think they're nice people. I think they're pretty horrible. But I see that there's also a lot of good people out there who you just meet in your day-to-day life. And I think because I'd say really the with religious society, I'd say it's sort of essential, and it is essential. And that what has happened actually, I think, is that with we never had atheist society until after the Enlightenment. It wasn't a thing before then. We just had the various religious societies in the past, initially the polytheistic ones and then the monotheistic ones. And so this notion of going to a local house of worship with the local community and worshipping the deity that who you pledge allegiance to, that is something that's completely ingrained in us, and it's something we've done for the whole of all the way back until the agricultural revolution. And I think it just showcases or highlights the fact that we are a tribal species, and we need to have this local community, this tribe, who we to whom we belong. And so that was the case back when we were hunter gatherers as well. Before we created modern society, we were part of a tribe, and the tribe looked after each other, and they had each other's backs. And ever since we were Homo erectus, that was 1.9 million years ago, at that time we developed campfires, and we had singing. And so these are extremely important tribal behaviors that we engage in. And we did so, the whole time that we were hunter-gatherers. And then after we developed into modern humans, I'd say that we used religion as a way of emulating those earlier practices. And so we continue to be a tribal species and to engage in group singing and group worship and all of that. And that kind of that led us to who we are today. But then we've had this this atheist movement came along, and it seems that it was just promoting complete individualism, like everyone can just get on by on their own merits, and everyone can just look after themselves, and they don't have to look after other people. And I think when you start going down that line, then spiritually life becomes a lot worse, and you start becoming a much nastier person, and you're generally headed to a more hedonistic society as well. And I think you then get all of these intolerant ideas, and notions such as feminism and all of the other bigoted ideas, that exist within this new woke religion, as I call it. So, wanted to get your take on all of that.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing just before you said. Um, it, it it is really like atheism and especially intersectionality. They are loads of people have made the comparison that they are very religious in the way that they behave, and like you were saying, in like our early history before like we had proper civilization built up around us. We were around the campfire singing, and religion does emulate that. And with like intersectionality and feminism and atheism, they like to pretend that they're above that kind of behavior. Like, oh, we don't think in that kind of way, especially atheism, I think. But then when you actually look at their behavior and the way that they speak and ostracization of people who don't fall in line with their kind of thinking, I've experienced that myself. Like as soon as I started questioning what it was that I believed and I started doing therapy and was thinking more healthily, it was instantly, oh, you're alt right, you're this, that, and the other, and then cut off completely. Oh, can't associate with her anymore. Wrong think kind of thing. But like you were saying with the whole religious aspect, it is kind of they act like, oh, we're so tolerant, we'll accept anyone, but not those horrible intolerant people who are kind of in all reality just trying to live in a more positive way. And like you said, the pardon me, the hedonistic behavior. And I did definitely saw that in my own life. I was smoking weed. I was a feminist. I didn't really take good care of my appearance, like because it's beauty standards and all this kind of thing. And I was definitely going down that path, thinking very negatively, not thinking about the people around me, um, kind of being selfish in a way, but selfish in a like the victim kind of mentality sort of way, where I was more preoccupied with myself in a like putting myself down, constantly thinking about negative things that had happened in my life and not believing that I had any kind of power to change what was going on around me or improve my life in any kind of way. And it is very individual in the sense that you cut yourself off from a community where you all kind of band together to help each other out. And now I do feel, after doing therapy and after um, being more respectful of Christianity and looking into it a little bit more, not always like taking things out of context or viewing everything as negative, just sort of looking at what was the message behind like these Bible stories. And I took a lot of inspiration. It was actually thanks to one of the main people in mainstream was Jordan Peterson that I started
Mm-hmm.
listening to and started taking on the advice and realized if I carry on going the way that I am, I'm just going to make my life a million times worse. I have to be the one to take charge and develop a backbone, but then also self-reflect in a very
Mm-hmm.
serious kind of way, like where am I heading, and I can improve it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's it's pretty good moral advice that he gives, and yeah, I think he's helped millions of people to live a more positive life, and yeah, I mean just kind of going back to what you say about the hedonistic liberal feminist all of that combined movement. I'd say yeah, it does. It like probably going back to your original point as well about that catastrophizing as well. That
Yeah,
way of thinking where you start looking at the motives of other people and you start projecting ideas onto what they said and twisting it round. Oh, did they mean this? Did they mean that? And it is quite a vindictive way to think about other people. And I think once you sort of go down that route a little bit, then it becomes harder to socialize with other people, because you start suspecting everyone. And also, I think that that negative mindset is, yeah, it does exist if you're kind of engaged in a more hedonistic lifestyle or sort of unhealthy lifestyle, and then you're not living all that well yourself. And you start, rather than doing the self-reflection, which is the direction you should be taking, instead of doing that, you start thinking, oh well, it's probably other people, that's the problem here. It's not me. I'm completely fine, no issues here. But other people, that's the reason why I'm feeling down, even though I'm not prepared to admit that I'm feeling down. And yeah. So I think that is it's a massive trap that a lot of young people fall into. And yeah, I mean, for me, when I think when, like, in my life, the hedonism stuff kind of came along when I was at school. And I was probably at the same time, moving in a healthy direction, like working quite hard at my A levels, and also playing rugby and so on. But then at the same time, enjoying the going out partying, drinking lots, getting into recreational drugs. Then I went to the uni, and then the drinking and recreational drugs side won. And I was going down that path for a while. And I think initially everyone is enjoying that lifestyle and thinking it's great and so on. But the problem isn't so much, that you might have a rough night out. And we certainly had a few of those. The problem more is what is this going to look like in 5 years' time? Or what's this going to look like in 10 years' time? If you continue along the exact same path, and are you going to end up in a good destination then? And so it's the slow falling apart over time. And yeah, I think I got to a point where my drinking was just not good. And I was having a lot of the blackouts and so on from kind of going out to nightclubs and just getting absolutely trolleyed. And then it was a bit of a disaster the next day. And so after that, it was a kind of slow crawling back to a better life. And I did also see the Jordan Peterson videos on YouTube, kind of en route to that better life. And so I think there is a with Christianity, I think it's a great movement, because it does, it tells you what you are. Essentially, it tells you are a sinner, and that you are broken, and that the goodness doesn't reside in you. It's external, and you need to reach towards Jesus in order to become good, in order to become better. And so you see, when you're leading a decent life, that has to be your focus. And I do think that also when you start leading a better life, it's a healthier life, and you're much more productive, and you're getting a whole load more stuff done, and other people like you a lot better. And so it's kind of a virtuous cycle, isn't it? And I'd say it's where you want to be. And yeah, I think that there is a lot of work that has been done by this. Unfortunately, it's been done by this liberal society to kind of corrupt the youth. And especially in this last year, when I've seen the I guess in the build up to the US election, and we saw all of the Antifa idiots and all of the Black Lives Matter idiots as well over in the States, in places like Portland, burning their city down. I'm just seeing a lot of hedonism there, and a lot of people who don't have this mentality, where they're trying to lead a decent life, and they're trying to build a positive future for themselves and for other people. I'm not really seeing it there. So yeah, what do you make of all of that anyway?
Yeah, I have similar kind of experiences because I remember around like the age of 16 and leaving secondary school and thinking of going to college, and one like obviously everyone wants to know what you're interested in doing, what are your plans for the future. And I remember mentioning to someone I was very close to, well, I'm thinking about doing maybe a hairdressing course, or just some sort of soft skill that I can use to make money on the side, because my main focus was never like a high flying career or anything like that. I always loved children. Um, and so I thought, well, I'll work, but my main focus is going to be on my family. And once I have children, I don't really plan on having a full-time career, especially when they're very young, like under the age of 5. Maybe I can. And I did think, oh, well, hairdressing is something you can do in your own time to earn a little bit of money on the side to help, like, contribute a little bit. But then once I mentioned doing that to this person that I was very close to, they kind of completely, pardon my French, shat all over that idea of like, oh no, well, what if you don't have a good husband? What if he doesn't have a good job? What if he leaves you and then you'll end up just like your mum, with living on a council estate with kids and nothing to show for your life, and being very young and impressionable. That was like my worst nightmare. And
Mhm.
to like say, oh well, here's my dream, and to then be told, well, if you follow your dream, you'll just end up with your worst nightmare. And that kind of caused me to, I think, have no direction. So I was more or less like, well, if I can't follow my dream, what am I supposed to do? And at a very young age, that can have a massive knock-on effect. And I did go to college. I did health and social care, um, because I thought, well, maybe if I'm not going to have my own kids and for a while, and that's not going to be my main focus, maybe I can just look after other people's kids and I can find
Mhm.
joy in that. And I didn't take well, I didn't have very good influence around me to kind of tell me what a healthy relationship looks like, what I should be looking in a partner. It was more or less, well, if you focus on being a housewife, your life will be a disaster. And so it wasn't focused on, let me help you
That's probably one of
find
the
a good
worst
path.
things I think I've ever heard. Just that statement there.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was quite maybe slightly traumatizing for a young 16-year-old
Mm.
girl,
Yeah,
saying
you know.
this is the way I want to take my life. And so then I didn't have very healthy relationships. I wasn't very good at communicating with people, and it was only this year that I was diagnosed as on the autism spectrum. So I've always kind of had issues with communicating with people and not understanding their intentions. And so I did have quite a few one or two unhealthy relationships, and quite dysfunctional at the same time. Maybe they also didn't have good influence around them of how to
Mhm.
communicate with people, what you should be looking for in a partner. And it wasn't until after I came out of feminism, that I started to realize, there's certain things that I shouldn't tolerate, but there's also definitely things within myself that other people shouldn't tolerate. I was very arrogant, um, like shaming kind of behavior was going on, and I started to realize, one, I have to take a really good, long, hard look at myself, but then also the kind of relationships that I was getting into. And then something else you mentioned, um, like the liberal kind of environment that I was in, just this sort of do whatever makes you happy. But how are you
Mhm.
supposed to know what makes you happy? And then when you do say, oh well, I think this will make me happy. No, 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 that's old fashioned.
Mhm.
You don't want to go down that path. But yeah, and then so I was kind of just floundering quite a bit. And now I'm more have a sense of my actions have an effect on the people around me. And it was since I started to correct my own behavior and say, well, I won't tolerate like the kind of negative hedonistic behavior, heavy drinking all the time, illicit drugs, that kind of thing, I kind of put my foot down and said, no, I'm not going to tolerate this anymore. If you want to do that, you can go and do that, but I don't want it anywhere near me. But then once I started doing that, it had a knock-on effect on the people around me. I stopped smoking weed, I've stopped drinking. I'll have a odd glass of wine like every couple of months, but it's nowhere near as bad as it used to be. And like you said, having blackouts and not remembering like what was going on, engaging in behavior that I felt, well, that's not me, that's not how I want to be. And it had a knock-on effect. People I know who have also quit smoking weed since I did, stopped drinking so much, and just not going down that kind of negative path where you end up maybe in arguments that you didn't intend to be in, like screaming and shouting. There's a way to interact with people around you that actually will bring you to the outcomes that you want. You know, you want positive outcomes, so you have to change your own behavior, and then that has a knock-on effect. And I think it was something that Jordan Peterson said, like, you are a node in a network, and if you start doing certain things, that has an effect on all the people around you. If you know 1,000 people, and then they know 1,000 people, it does have this kind of ripple effect. And another quote from Jordan Peterson that kind of sticks in my mind is when people ask, "Oh, do you believe in God?" And he responded with, "I act as though God exists." So it's not necessarily do I believe in like what they think God is or what they think a higher being is. It's just a more positive way of behaving and reflecting on yourself.
Oh, okay, so just in terms of so I guess he's not actually committing to whether there is a God, but he's saying that his own behavior has to be in line with the idea that there might be a divine creator who's watching everything he does. Fair enough. Okay, I'm more on the actual Christian side, but I'll accept it. Um, you also mentioned about the weed use as well, and because I think we're sort of different generations, but for me, when I was growing up, I think that particular drug was massively overrated. I'm not sure if it's the same thing for young people growing up now, whether it's a case of oh yeah, you know, everyone should just smoke weed and then that'll solve all of the world's problems. And it's you know, it's so much better than alcohol, which makes people violent. You know, this is a sort of peace-loving drug, and there's kind of no focus on the actual problems it causes, and it's like if you look at these problems, usually it's not violence. I'll accept that, but then a lot of people are having severe mental health problems on this drug, and it's a really serious issue. And you know, when I was working as a mental health nurse before, I saw a lot of people come into acute wards with you know, having smoked too much weed and then having had a psychotic breakdown. And so I think, you know, that there's a problem with all of the recreational drugs, but certainly with this one, I think it's massively overrated. I'm not sure if that was also your impression of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And like when I started hanging around the people that I knew that smoked weed, it was at a very low point in my life. I'd had a bad breakup, and then that kind of I went into a very like depressive state of I kind of didn't want to do anything, didn't want to. I didn't actually come. I lived with my dad, and I was his carer from a young age. And this was at the point where he didn't need any assistance really. I was more or less still living at home with my dad, and I didn't want to go home and face all the questions that he had for me. So I kind of like disappeared for 3 months, stayed at a friend's house, and just basically numbing myself with weed constantly, all day, every day, not taking good care of myself, allowing people to take advantage of me, And then also, like you said, it does have too many people don't focus on, well, they focus on the, oh, it's peace and loving, it's not a violent drug, but then they don't take a hard look at the negative side effects, like you were saying, one of the main things being paranoia. But then I also noticed, and people have said it to me since I've quit, and they've also quit, they were just kind of wasting their time, wasting their life, just sitting in four walls, puffing away, not taking things seriously, and maybe also tolerating things that they wouldn't tolerate if they were sober. And so since then, it's been a massive improvement. No longer feeling so anxious and, kind of waiting for the next hit, oh, like when are we going to roll another one, kind of thing, when are we going to roll another joint. And then it would also it was causing issues in my relationship. We would have arguments over nothing really, just because we're sitting there kind of like caged animals, especially at the beginning of lockdown. That like kind of intensified everything. And we're just sitting there like caged animals, pacing back and forth, thinking, where's the next joint going to come from?
Right.
And
Yeah.
and then also since then, and that's the kind of knock-on effect that I was talking about. Since I quit, other people around me have quit, and they're improving their lives and not engaging in like negative behavior. Maybe some people that I knew felt the need to lie about like their accomplishments and things that they'd done in their life for no reason whatsoever. Just like maybe they kind of felt that, oh, I haven't really achieved anything in my life, so I'm just going to make up these like fairy tale stories of what I have done, and just to sound impressive. But that really rubbed me the wrong way. Of it's very obvious that you're lying. So what's the point? Why are you doing this? And just a kind of wasting time, not fulfilling your full potential really. And I do feel that there isn't enough focus on how people can end up wasting their life. And then it might be a peaceful, non-violent drug like alcohol. Alcohol, you can tend to get into fights and become aggressive. But with weed, it's more of you can just waste away, sitting in a room and not fulfilling your full potential.
Yeah, I think that's one of the other, major things that we see from it, and I guess that just goes with the stoner image, isn't it? Is that someone, or stoner waster image? Someone who is just puffing on it, say all day long or something, and then is not doing a whole load else with their free time. It's mainly just that, and yeah, they're up at like 8 in the morning, rolling and smoking a joint then. And it's like, for someone looking in, it's like, maybe that's not the best way to start your day,
Yeah,
and like, you might want to get some more work done.
maybe
Yeah,
eat
and
breakfast, not
yeah,
smoke
yeah, yeah,
breakfast.
sure, yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, I completely agree with all of that, and I do. Yeah, it's sad to see that. I don't know. It seems to be a lot of this rubbish. Is just continuing with each generation as they get to that. Finishing school, entering college or university age, and so there's the woke religion, which is, it seems it's a terrible religion, to give to young people, but the education system is doing that, and it's also there in HR departments and on BBC News as well, and yeah, it seems that it's this vile religion that doesn't, there's no forgiveness, there's no consolidation, there's no getting on with other people, there's massive judgment of people based on race or on gender, so it's just an entirely divisive movement, and yeah, I think it's a far cry from what we had before, or what some of us have now, say in the Christian movement, or in other religious movements and other positive movements as well, that actually try to bring us together, and that actually try to get people to be generous to one another, and to kind of to just try and be nice and moral in our own lives. And I think with I think with liberal society's kind of promotion of hedonism, again, that's just a divisive movement that it leads to a lot of people becoming kind of wasters. And then in some situations it's worse than that. We see, for instance, people who drink too much and then get alcohol poisoning and can end up in hospital from there, or people who take too many drugs and a similar reaction happens there. And so in some cases it's fatal, for some people who go into the hedonistic culture and kind of go down this sort of wild ride of that. And then so I think there's the possibility that things can end up disastrously bad. And then over time there's also the certainty that your life will get worse. And then but I have seen, I think, I'd say the positives are definitely the Jordan Peterson lectures. I think he's really good at getting people to focus on their own lives and to start actually trying to build things back together. I think a lot of the self-help community online is pretty good now. And I'm not sure if you've seen many of the videos that have been done by this community. There's a number of like Modern Wisdom has done quite a few podcasts about this. And so I mean, he kind of focuses on sobriety and how that helped him, and generally just going through that phase when you've had enough of having a hedonistic life and you want to actually start having a more productive life. So yeah, I think quite often I'd say that it's a conversation that, or certainly it's a conversation that hasn't happened, and I think it does need to happen more. And I think definitely on that note, I just advise Christianity again, because I just think it gets us to see that we're not the source of goodness, and that we constantly need to focus on our own morality and on trying to do good, so that we can help ourselves and help other people and build a better community from there. And there was one other thing I'd like to look at with you as well, and that was so I think with the movement of feminism, and I'd say it came about in the 1960s. And a lot of the narratives that they spun were designed to try and get women into the workplace and to trash marriage and to stop that from happening, and to make women independent of men, so they no longer needed men, and so on. And I think and you also had the promotion of the hedonistic culture from there. And I think what you got from there was this hookup culture, where people would say go to bars or to nightclubs, young people, and they would hook up with partners here and there. And there was no real focus on them getting married, certainly not when they were young. Instead, women especially were told that they should just concentrate on their career and play the field and, have lots of partners and enjoy the hedonistic lifestyle generally. And then they can get married later on. So I think that this is an ethos that has developed within this, within liberal society. And I think it's a really bad ethos, I'd say. And I think for quite a few people that there is a need to go back to a more traditional system in terms of dating, in terms of gender relations. And but by doing that, I'm not saying maybe we should try and bring back the courtship system a bit more, because I think by doing that, you're generally building trust in the relationship. before you jump in the suck with one another. And this is a good thing, I believe, for ensuring that there's more successful relationships and that you get more couples who go on to get married and then have families and then ensure that the children they have actually have a decent home to grow up in. And I think liberal society has trashed that by promoting hookup culture. So yeah, I'd like to get your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, when I was younger, I was just maybe naturally more traditionally minded, of like wanting to be a wife and a mother, and like growing up and watching like maybe a few old movies here and there. I really loved the kind of, like, it was more of a system of like, okay, you get to know each other, you start dating officially, and then after a certain period of time you're engaged, then you go on to get married. And it was always everyone knew where they stood, kind of thing. Like, you, once you said you were going steady or we're dating officially, you knew where you stood. And now it's kind of like you were saying, hookup culture is more just like, do whatever you want, do whatever makes you feel good, go down to the bar, find somebody just for one night. But then it's not very, especially for women, and then that has a knock-on effect to everybody, where you're teaching women that they should just like go around and sleep with whoever they want. And there's more studies looking into it now. I believe there was a young woman doing her thesis on the effects of the pill and this kind of hookup culture and the more liberal dating kind of mentality, where even women who maybe in themselves were convinced, oh yeah, it's fine, I'm not looking for anything serious, they start sleeping with like maybe one man in particular or a few, but then after that breaks off and it doesn't become a relationship, they are then surprised with themselves, with their emotions. And like a term that has been going around for a few years now is catching feelings, as if it's like a disease, like, oh, you shouldn't want to have an emotional connection with somebody. And that just seems really unhealthy to me. And so like when the pill came around, it was supposed to be like, oh, women can take control of their bodies and their reproduction. And at first it was only available to married couples. But then I guess from feminist lobbying and that sort of thing, it became available to all women. And then that kind of opens the floodgates for all this kind of behavior where you can just go and sleep around with whoever you want, but then no focus on how it actually affects you mentally and possibly physically as well. And I was always like, I didn't see the point of dating somebody if I didn't eventually somewhere down the line see us getting married and having children. And I remember not too long ago, after I left feminism and no longer associated myself with it, there was a young woman that I knew through my work. I was just working as a waitress, but she came to me and said, oh, this guy is interested, he wants to get your number. And I said, well, I was just very straightforward. It's like, I'm not interested. Not that he's a bad guy, but maybe one, if he doesn't feel confident enough approaching me and asking for my number himself, he doesn't really have a lot of self-confidence, and that's probably something he should work on in himself. But then her response was, oh, it doesn't really matter if you're not interested, maybe we can just double date and get a free lunch out of it anyway. I'm like, oh wow, is that really the way you operate? You don't
Right.
you're not really taking into account the man's emotions. Like he's actually showing an interest in you romantically, and you're just like, oh well, I'll get a free lunch out of it even if I don't find him attractive in any kind of way. I thought that was quite disgusting, the way that it's going. And I can't remember how old I was exactly when Tinder became a thing, but I can proudly say that I never went anywhere near all these kind of dating apps and dating sites. It was more or less just people who I met through family members or mutual friends or where I worked. I've only done like just like I said, waitressing, or I was an usher in a cinema at one point. So it was just kind of more of getting to know people in that kind of sense. But yeah, I do feel like it has a massive negative effect on women, especially where they're convincing themselves like, oh, it doesn't matter, I can do this thing and it will have no effect. But then it does clearly have an effect, because another example that I know from my own personal life, a woman started sleeping with this guy, and eventually they did become official. But then she asked him, and it was kind of a trap question. She asked him, oh, when we first started seeing each other, did you see it as serious, or was it just like a fling, like have our fun kind of thing? And she admitted herself, like, oh, I only saw it as like we're having our fun, but then eventually we started to develop feelings and we became official. And he agreed. He said, yeah, I felt the same way. We were just going to have our fun, and then I was going to go back to my ex. But then suddenly she became very emotional and got upset with the fact that he agreed. Said, yeah, that was the dynamic that we had at the time, but now we're in a couple. Oh, how dare you, it's disrespectful. But you both had that same mentality. So do you agree with that?
It seems
or...
like false outrage to me, that does.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, no, I do see. I think a lot of those behaviors, it's kind of a much more narcissistic way of going about your own life, and I think that has been promoted by the liberal hedonistic society as a kind of mentality of he's not using me, I'm using him. And sort of this way of seeing other people as something that's there to be used for your own self-satisfaction or sexual satisfaction. And I think with generally, if young people are just meeting, say, at a nightclub where you're really intoxicated, and it's also a setting where, say, the woman is scantily clad and is trying to attract men via her attractive, sexual attractiveness, and he's she's looking out for the man with the higher level of sexual prowess. Overall, I don't think this situation leads to a high level of success in terms of forming lots of couples. And I just think it's a tragedy, certainly with Tinder, because with that particular dating app, I'd say with the old traditional religious system, we had a far more effective dating app in the past, and that was that. And now it seems with that primarily focuses on this kind of instant attraction and getting cheap thrills and using other people, and just sort of sleeping around and doing whatever you want. And if you use that kind of mentality, then I suppose when you are young, and say if you're a woman, you've got some sexual attractiveness, you can you can do fairly well on that system for a little bit of time. But then obviously as you get a bit older, the sexual attractiveness starts to diminish, and then you hit the wall, and then it goes into steep decline. And I think for for men as well, if women are just focusing on say male sexual prowess, then they're not actually helping to develop that, because in order to develop that, I think you need to have more relationships that are built on trust, and that actually I think helps develop good, strong gender relations, and also ensures that people have better sex lives as well. So I mean that was kind of my theory on the whole hookup culture thing that we've seen develop in liberal society. And yeah, it seems that it has become, just as time has gone on, it's become more of a tragedy. And and it's just kind of depressing as well. Like if it's a I've seen some of like I've never got anywhere near actually creating a Tinder profile, but it does seem somewhat depressing if the guy is having to get his top off in order to show off his biceps and other muscles and so on, so that he can be regarded in the highest quantile and then get more likes from women. I don't know. That's just one of these massive kind of face palm moments, and it's like I'm not against people being fit and healthy, but I don't think that it's good to use it as a way of engaging in behavior that's narcissistic. I think that's where all the problems come from and so on. So I don't know. Any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, and saying the like narcissistic kind of behavior, looking back over Laura Bates's book Everyday Sexism, that is like the massive vibe that I can pick up from it now. Just this kind of like, it really does ooze with this, I know exactly what these people are thinking, and like any kind of minor comments can be completely taken out of context. But then also with like relationships, I do feel like women, especially women, mostly, if not all, not all women, but the large majority, men do focus on what they bring to the table, but I don't feel like there's that much of a focus on what women bring to the table.
Mm-hmm.
And then also feminism has kind of tricked women into thinking that if they have like a big fancy like career, that is the same to men as it is to women. Like if you have a man who's very successful in his career, that is very appealing to women, but it's not the same thing when the roles are reversed. And so you have like so many women thinking, well, I earn all this money, I'm so successful. That's not what's appealing. And then they kind of have that narcissistic mentality where they're not focused on how they are as a person. They're not focused on how they treat people and how they interact with people. It's more or less, oh well, all these other, and the term dating down has become a massive thing recently. All these men, they earn less than me, so I couldn't possibly date down, when men would never refer to women in that kind of way. And I do feel like women need to self-reflect on the way that they behave, the way that they treat the people around them, and think more in a kind of compassionate kind of sense, with empathy, rather than, well, if you don't like me at my worst, so when you're screaming or when you're being arrogant, maybe using shaming kind of tactics, that kind of mentality of, if you don't like me at my worst, then you don't deserve me at my best kind of thing. It's like, well, if your best is being sarcastic and thinking so highly of yourself, and your worst is screaming and shouting and being a bitch, basically,
Mm-hmm.
then what is it that you have to offer?
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, this is a really toxic mindset, isn't it? Of your partner should like you when you're at your
Yeah.
worst. No, they shouldn't.
No.
No one, including yourself, should like you when you're at your worst.
Yeah.
Like it's something you should try and avoid, and it's not good for you or for anyone else if you like go around thinking that oh, it's okay for me to act at my worst. And it's like no, it's not good for like for anyone to see that. No one wants to see that. So yeah, I mean, no, I think that's some pretty good points there, and I'd agree with the other point you made, that I think that there has been like a serious problem with the workplace, in that I think that both men and women do want men to earn more, and they want men to have decent careers so that they can afford a house, so that they can be a good provider to a woman. And I think this liberal society, over time, it seems to be more of a globalist society as well. It seems as though there has been just a massive project to stop that from happening, to try and kind of falsely push women ahead in the workplace, and to stop men from actually achieving in a whole bunch of industries. And I think it's an absolute nightmare, because it's just completely destroyed the this really virtuous agreement that we've always had between the two genders, where men are the ones who go out into the chaos of nature. And I mean, we are stronger, and we're also designed to be disposable. And we actually enjoy taking on that role if it's allowed to develop. And women, on the other hand, they protect themselves a lot more, and they see themselves as the protected gender. And they also they give birth to the next generation, and they look after them, and they want to be protected and provided for. And so it's such an integral part of our nature. This contract has always been there between the two genders, and I think the society in the last 60 years has kind of trashed that through I think through feminism, and then the feminization of the workplace. And I mean, like, I sort of harp on about this, but I think it's such an important point, and I think it does need to be discussed. And hopefully, if enough people start discussing that, then we can look at actual solutions to some of the problems that have happened. I mean, I was talking to Rick Bradford about this, and like, he's pretty knowledgeable on a lot of these matters. But he was saying that in the past, until fairly recently in the UK, you could have a family in a house that was supported on one person's wage, and it was usually the man. And so the man was able to go off to work and support his wife, who was able to have children. And while it wasn't a fantastic existence, with lavish holidays and whatnot every year, they were actually, creating a family and living well. But it seems that we've moved away from that, and it's become harder and harder for young people to buy houses anyway. And you get the whole situation where they have to combine their wages in order to afford a mortgage, and then by doing that, you're putting more pressure on the relationship. But then you're also seeing, I think, some of the other factors are you're kind of seeing the rise of the landlord class, who you get the very rich landlords who own like 5,000 homes, or just absolute tons of properties, and they just want to rent them out to tenants who are then in house shares. And you see other bubbles as well. Like, I think in London, there's a lot of these houses that or flats that are owned by these rich Saudis, and they've got no one in them, and it's part of this property bubble. And it seems, though I'm not an expert on all of it, and it seems there's so many elements to it, but the factor that I've noticed is that it's not a system that is particularly honouring this idea of the man going to work, getting a decent job so he can afford to get a mortgage, get a house, and then a wife sort of from there, and them being able to start a family from there, just reliant on his income, and maybe her doing a bit of supplementary income. And I think that particular dynamic is always something that's benefited us. So yeah, I'd like to get your take on that one.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it was actually something that I heard. I wouldn't be able to cite any sources, but just like watching certain podcasts and things like this, they mentioned that quite a few years ago, I think it was possibly even before the 2016 election, that what's one of the I've forgotten her name now. Well, it was one of the Democrat. It was the female Democrats, one of the runners.
Mm.
But she wrote a book with her daughter, and it's funny enough, her name is escaping me. Apart from Pocahontas, what's the one that Trump calls Pocahontas?
Right.
Elizabeth
Is
Warren.
it
There we go. It came to me.
okay? Right.
Yeah. So I think I heard quite a few years ago she wrote a book with her daughter on the subject of families used to be able to, like you said, support themselves on one income, like the man's
Mm,
income. That was
mhm,
the main thing. And like you said, not a lavish kind of existence, but you would be able to afford a mortgage and your bills and that sort of thing. And women could work if they chose to work, but
mhm,
then it would be more focused on maybe a field that they are passionate about, maybe more in line with their own kind of morals or lifestyle kind of thing. Maybe nursing, or in a creative kind of sense, like making certain things that they could sell on. But now, like you said, that it's almost impossible for a family to have one income. And I also heard somewhere along the line that basically, when so much emphasis is being put on getting women into education, getting women into the workforce, and all these kind of higher up positions, but when you actually look at female nature, you'll have, say, maybe 20% of the female population will be naturally more career minded, and that will be their focus. And you'll have 20% of the female population that will want to be housewives and probably not work much of their adult life, if at all. Their main focus is on the home, and then you have the rest of women that will be like 60% will be in and out of the workforce throughout their whole life. But where you have so much emphasis on women and not enough emphasis on men, it's going to have a massive effect on the economy, and it probably already has. Like we're
mhm,
saying, with the dual income is necessary these days,
mhm,
and it's putting a lot of strain on families and couples. And but then it is going to have a massive knock-on effect when all of these women who will be in and out of the workforce throughout their lives and taking large breaks to be able to raise their families, it's going to have a massive knock-on effect on God knows what else.
mhm.
And in other communities, like maybe working class communities, and maybe minor. I've heard bits and pieces about black the black community where so much emphasis is put on the females succeeding, and nowhere near enough is put on like focusing towards helping men and boys succeed, because majority of men will work throughout their entire lives because they don't really have any other option. It's not, even though you have kind of feminism trying to push like men having more involvement in their children's lives, and there is positives to that, but for the majority of men's lives, it's always you have to have a job, you have to do these things
Mhm.
in order to be seen as successful or even as a possible partner. Because if you, like, when you look at younger generations, if you hear about a young 18-year-old girl who still lives at home, doesn't have a job, and she's supported by her family, that's not seen as a massive negative thing. It's like, oh well, she's just still trying to figure out what she wants to do. But if you reverse that, and it's you have an 18-year-old young man who still lives at home, no job, no kind of not in education, he is seen very negatively, like, oh, he's
Mm.
lazy, he has no direction in his life, he needs to kick up the arse to kind of get out there and produce something.
Okay, yeah, yeah. I think what you say specifically is that in working class communities, that's that ethos, or just generally?
I think generally, like most young men and men in general, um, like, you do have to have a job. It's not really an option to
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of coast through life the same that way that women can do. But
Mm.
I think the emphasis on female education and like lack of emphasis on male education is having a massive effect on the
Yeah,
working
yeah.
class. And it's not often talked about, but I think I heard somewhere that the lowest educated group in the UK at least is white working class boys. They are falling so far
I've heard
behind.
this as well. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and if it is spoken about, I've heard from like people who are in college at the moment, well, in university at the moment, and in the gender studies departments. Like, if it is brought up, it's blamed on the boys themselves. Like,
Hmm.
oh, education is seen as like unmasculine and kind of gay in a sense. Or that
Hmm.
it's the internalized homophobia, like, I don't want to put effort into my education or getting a job or working hard. Like, that doesn't make any sense at all. If you know anything about men, it is very much about they want to succeed and produce something. And as you said, men have always been the ones to go out into
Yeah,
like
yeah.
nature and do the hard work.
I think the other point you brought up with the black community as well,
Mm.
I think there's some serious problems there, especially, I mean, we've got obviously in the US, in the welfare state over there, and I'd say that it's a similar problem in certainly in London and other cities in the UK as well. Of there's this kind of glamorization of the gangster lifestyle, and this idea that there's loads of white racism everywhere, and that if you don't want to actually be trying at school, because if you do that, you'll be acting white,
Yeah,
and this sort of like you can't get ahead because of all of this racism and so on, and it's the same thing as the sort of feminist mentality of just it's not my problems. There's no point me trying to get better, even though like I'm a 15-year-old kid. There's no need for me to engage in any self-improvement at all. And I mean, it's a ridiculous mentality, but they do seem to be putting it onto, in this case, young black boys and young black men. And yeah, I think that there's a lot of problems there. Yeah, I mean, I do overall. I think that in this discussion, we've covered a lot of the. I'd say a lot of the problems that have been brought in by this. I see it overall as being this globalist movement who have, since the 60s, been bringing in radical feminism, and then there's all of the other woke movements, and it seems that each of them they're all really destructive, and they all destroy the family, and they're preventing people from going ahead and actually creating strong and healthy families and raising children to be strong and healthy so they can run the society well. And it seems the woke movement targets all of that, and it wants to destroy all of that. So I mean, yeah, I sort of I'm just hoping that even though it looks bleak at the moment, I do think that for in the past, for the last 1800 years at least in the UK, it's been the religion of Christianity that's brought us together as a people, and that has helped us to re-establish the local community and good gender relations and a strong moral society. And I mean, it's great that you're looking into that now, but you're just looking for a decent church to go to that
yeah.
is also not infected with the woke religion as it is.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And like you were saying, where Christianity has like always brought people together in the UK. And I was actually thinking of Erin Pizzy. I do believe like she is a Christian, and
Mm.
I think she's been a Christian most of her life. I was just thinking of like intersectionality, and particularly feminism, has this focus on, well, men are the problem. And especially when you have like dysfunctional families or dysfunctional situations that then lead to domestic violence, it's always men are the problem, men cause the violence. There's no focus on female violence. And if it is mentioned, it's kind of like, oh, well, that's because she's traumatized because of what her father did, or some male. So there's always a male to blame, but there's no focus on how to kind of break that generational cycle of,
Mm-hmm.
there was abuse with the grandparents, there's abuse with the parents, and then there will be abuse with the next generation. And that was Erin Pizzi's focus, where she said it's not it's not necessarily, you can't just blame men, you can't just blame everything on on males. It is caused by trauma, but then that means it can be addressed and it can be fixed. And then also um, there is that kind of sense, like you said, in Christianity, where you need to improve your own behavior and come together. And it was actually, like you said, I'm looking for a decent church. I don't know if there would be really one in my local area, because there was a local church that I was thinking of maybe popping into, until they sent a Christmas card that had all this intersectionality stuff around it, saying, oh, we're all in, like, all encompassing, all, accept everyone. Is like, there are certain things that you can accept, but then there has to be a line drawn somewhere. But yeah, I was just kind of throwing a few more ideas out there.
Thank you for your time, Michelle.
Thank you for having me.